right.
We're back now for phase 2, Andy. You know, you took us through the warm-up process. Now we're going to dive into some training. We're going to go over our pressing and our pulling, right?
Yeah, we'll do a little upper body. So,
okay.
So the first thing in the pressing is I think that obviously the way that you tweak the exercise biomechanically is going to change the muscle focus. So obviously on any press you can make it more tricep, more anterior shoulder. You can make it a little bit more, pec major. A lot of people obviously have been the presses for that. You can make it a little more pec minor if you want. But what I've found is a lot of the presses for a lot of athletes or people, again, are going to be doing different things overhead. Maybe you have to do a lot of chin-ups, or you have to do a lot of different types of overhead type exercises. Or if you have pathology in your shoulder, so you have any kind of pain or impingement, there are certain ways that I like to do most of these upper body exercises and ways to minimize that type of pathology. So that's my focus. Not to say one way is right and another way is wrong. It's really just to say here's the way I've generally kind of ended up in terms of how I approach most of the pressing exercises. So I like to develop most of the upper body. We got a really limited amount of stuff that you can do. So obviously in a bodybuilding routine, you might have upwards of 30 different exercises for your upper body. If you're doing a holistic program, you might have 7 or 8 different upper body exercises in a program. So I try to get the most symmetrical development of the upper body that we're trying to look for. And if you go from a side view here, Matt, you turn around this way, and go into a pressing motion for me. The way the shoulder works is the shoulder really moves in 3 ways. It can essentially roll forward and roll back. It can go up and down, and then it can protract forward and then retract backwards. So I'm always looking for a muscle that's tilted backwards, that's depressed downwards, and then that's retracted. So that's really the position of the shoulder I tend to prefer. So what I find with a lot of pressing exercises is for most athletes, when they go through this range of motion, they get to a point where their range of motion is limited through the pec and the anterior part of the deltoid and the bicep tendon. And so the only way that they can get their hand deeper is to roll the shoulder forward. Oh, right? So that's essentially what happens. And when you're in that position, the stress actually comes off the pec and goes right into the anterior part of the shoulder because it's a very tensous area. So there's a lot of tension on the bands of the bicep tendon and the pec minor. So you can do a lot more from that position. So what I actually find is I'll use the range of motion that the athlete has. So if you retract your shoulders, not necessarily up, but you use your lats to retract your shoulders, and you come back this way, and you get into a pressing position there. Yep. Once you hit your range of motion, that's what I find. So sometimes I will coach the athlete to that range of motion, or we'll press off a rack or do something to kind of keep them in that stage and try to keep them out of those types of pressing positions. That's what I look for.
What happens if my back goes like this, Andy?
Well, I think it depends. I like a little bit of an arch, but that's going to change the position of the shoulder a little bit, right? Once you start to arch your back, there's a greater likelihood that you're going to fall into an anterior tilt of the shoulder, right? So the more arch that you have, the more you're likely going to get in this position. So the general rules that I have is maintain a normal lordotic curve of the spine, okay? The other is I like a 45 degree. Okay, so we go to the front angle now. I like a 45-degree angle of the humerus. Okay. So if you're up here, again, it's going to increase the likelihood that you're going to roll forward because you have more demands in your range of motion.
Right.
Obviously, up here there's more shoulder. There's a lot more pec minor. Obviously, as you get down further, it's a lot more lat, a lot more pec minor. Of course. Or pec major rather. So one of the big problems is that most people like to press up here because they like their traps. First of all, you like your traps a lot, right? Yeah. So what I always try to use as a cue is if you can push my hand down to 45 degrees, you're now just engaging your lat a little bit more, and now your trap is turned off. So if you can retract your shoulders, but maintain the activation of the lat and the retraction, and you push from this position, that's going to give you more lat and more pec.
I feel that,
Right? What happens when you get higher, so lift from me here now, so lift up against my hand, press from there, way more trap, way more anterior deltoid.
Totally feel that.
So the whole idea is for most people, they have a tendency to press up here. They get a little bit more pec minor development, a lot more anterior deltoid, a lot more trap. I like both from an athletic perspective to create a little more thickening around the trunk. So if you pull down and then retract for me, but maintain that activation as you retract. There you go. Okay. So the idea is not to use your upper trap to retract.
Right.
It's to use your rhomboids and your lats. Right.
So rhomboid and lat. Okay.
Yes. There you go. So now we're using the mid part of the back, and then as you press from here, and maintain that 45-degree angle using a lot more pec major.
Oh, I feel that, Andy.
Okay, and then if you go through the press, maintain it through the whole press, watch the pec major come alive. You see that?
Oh, yeah.
So now you've got a lot more pec major. Try that up in this position and press through the range of motion.
Oh, yeah.
You can see it's pec major anterior deltoid, right?
There's no chest really at all.
Yeah, so if you really want to build, pec major, which a lot of people do, and lat, you want to pull downward.
Downward.
There you go. And then retract fully. Maintain that position and then press all the way through.
Whoa.
And then you're going to get a little bit more
big difference
pec.
in chest.
So the whole concept is, why do we want this? Again, if your goal is to get way more anterior deltoid, by all means, press up in this position. But with a lot of my athletes, I just find there's way too much shoulder issues and pathology up here. So I find this is a really nice way to symmetrically build a lot of the different muscles, especially in your trunk. And I'm a big believer in developing the trunk first, and then the extremity second. So the other thing is the line between the elbow and the wrist. In my opinion, should be perpendicular to the ground, or consistent with the line of push. So what that means is we want to avoid this, because that's going to put a lot of pressure on the rotator cuff, and a lot of pressure on the labrum, actually, depending on how high you get. And we want to avoid this. This is going to create an impingement scenario, right? So what we want to do is we want to try to keep this line so it's 45 degrees, and then the hand, that line between the hand and the elbow should go straight down to the ground and create a perpendicular angle. Right? So it's basically coming through this 45 degree, you're going to retract, but stay low, so you went right to your trap there. Good, right there. Pull, keep your lats engaged, you're still a little too much trap, right there, good. Now, out of this, press and stay low, and push through. Now I'm cueing you to stay low, but there's obviously a point where it's too low. So for you, that tends to drift high. I'm cueing you down to 45 degrees. By no means do we want to get you here.
No.
Right? We're just trying to take you from there to there. If you're somebody that likes your triceps and you love pressing from here, maybe we need to lift you up a little bit, right?
Gotcha.
But for most people, I think they're going to be in this position, and then you want to come down and then press from there. So you want to try it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question though.
Yes.
Why do we hear the concept about these wide bench press techniques? They, go wide because you're going to get this stretch.
So
what do you think?
Again, it really depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to bench press as much as possible and you want to reduce the stroke distance, maybe wide is a good way to do it. I'm actually a big believer of bench pressing a little bit more narrow, but at the end of the day, there's no right or wrong, but when you go wide, you're taking the tricep out of it, and you're putting a lot more pressure on the pec minor and the shoulder, right? When you go narrower, you're putting a lot more medial deltoid and tricep back into the lift. What I find is when you go wide, that's actually increasing the range of motion demands of the shoulder. Most people don't have that range of motion in the shoulder, right? So watch when you go through a narrow kind of barbell lift for me. So go to a little narrower grip and then come back for me. Retract your shoulders here. You can see you can get pretty good range here. Now let's go wide and try to do the exact same thing. See what happens to your shoulder? Right? If you roll forward here, Matt, a little bit for me, that's where you're going to end up. Right? When you're in that inferiorly rotated position of the shoulder, it's the most vulnerable position for the shoulder capsule itself. So when you're bench pressing in that position, typically what you see is people with crazy tight bicep tendon, crazy tight pec minor, and here's what it looks like. Does that look familiar? So if you're going to bench press in that position, this is ultimately where you're going to be. It's a very trap dominant, very restricted at this sort of anterior junction of the shoulder. If your goal is scap stability and scapular control, you probably are better off doing some things with activation of the scap. So a vast majority of the shoulder rehabilitative techniques, go see any physiotherapist or any rehabilitative specialist with a shoulder, the first thing that they're working on is they're working on scapular control and rotator cuff strength. So why not just put a little scapular control into the lifts, so that it doesn't become a problem in the first place, right? And I actually think you can get really good scapular control eccentrically on a press without having to do a million different scap exercises personally. But I think it comes with some activation of the rhomboids and the lower traps to retract the scapula in the right way and prevent it from winging forward during the lift.
That's cool. Try some, Andy?
Yeah, let's get in there. So again, an incline, set both hands up, So you're just going to practice a lift. So go into your natural position, like natural lift. Go ahead and just go through the motion a little bit for me. Good. So that's a little higher than 45. So I'm going to take you to here. Again, I want the hand and this in line. And now if I bring you all the way down, see what happens? You're rolling forward, right? So I want you to use your lats to pull your shoulder blades together. Down a little bit, right to there. Now press from there. Use the lat and the pec to press it out. Good. Okay. So that's the concept. But we need to avoid that. Okay. And we need to retract and depress and posteriorly tilt the shoulder.
The shoulder has a little bit of a
okay. So if you have a restriction or something like that, I don't think there's anything wrong with coming down to here, like a little deeper, retract. Yes, right there. Good. So if that's your range of motion, then that's your functional range of motion.
Yeah.
The idea that, oh, I'm just going to go deeper, that's not more range of the shoulder. That's artificial range. Okay. Right. So the shoulder is now in a new position. So that's like, I call it artificial range. It's like an illusion, right? If this is your range of motion, that's your range of motion. Yeah. You can't create range of motion just by lowering the hand and adjusting the position of the shoulders, right? So that's the whole idea. So let's grab the weights and we'll practice a couple reps here.
This is getting her. Okay.
Okay, so let's just do a few reps and get some control. Great elbow position and really focus on the retraction. Use the lat off the push. There you go. Good. Again. Good. And I would touch, so bring them right together. Yes, good. Stay a little lower on the left side as you push up. Lat, thick lat. There you go. There you go. Squeeze through as you push. Yes, good. Nice. And then one more. And relax. Great. Nice. So that's really the key thing. I can tell the left side's a little harder than the right side.
Yep.
And there's an inhibitory process. The trap is really working to try and protect the joint. Right? Yeah. So when you have this situation with the shoulder and you've got some impingement, that trap is really trying to create space. Okay. So it's really trying to create space by trying to pull the humerus out of that socket, and the lat is trying to stabilize it inside the socket. So it's really common to want to drift up when you've got labrum issues or impingement issues, and that can get better over time. So that's why we want to retrain the lat and really work on maintaining it through the push. Tight. So think lat. So the lat and the trap ultimately compete against each other. Right. So I always think get out of the trap, get into the lat, press away, and then you get a really good technique. Which if people who are favoring the pec, I know there's a lot of people that want a pec focused type of lift. If you go down, I can show you what the technique looks like. If you go down a little deeper. Yep. When you go to press from here, if you lock out at the elbow, okay, you're going to minimize the load in the pec. Right. So if you actually protract first before you lock out here, so bring the pec together, there you go. And then just go to like 90% extension here, you'll get more pec, right? I feel that. If you want more tricep, then you can prioritize the extension of the arm, right? But if you want to just minimize it by 10%, you're going to get a fair amount of pec, and then that way these are going to drift together and finish in that position, right? So what's really interesting with this one is if you come up into this position, you're going to get way more pec. The second you lock out, there's very little load on the pec. Yeah. I can give you twice as much weight and just hold it in this locked out position, and it's actually pretty easy. Yeah. The second it goes like slightly like this, now the pec has to do a lot of work to create that. So if you want more pec, just only lock out your elbow to 90%.
So when I'm down in this spot here, can I keep trying to activate my lats and my rhomboids to get them?
The way I would coach this is go all the way down for me. Retract. Yep. Now this is too deep, right? So this is very common. Somebody's trying to get their elbow down, they get down here. You really want to be at 45 degrees. Okay. Now I need a straight line. I need a straight line from the ground. So what you've done is this. Oh. This has to be perpendicular to the ground. Okay. Okay. And we go here. Now stay in your lat as you press through for me. Feel that? Yep. Okay. Come back down. Stay at 45. Use the lat. Yeah, nice. So all we're trying to do is turn the lat on. We're not trying to change the elbow position too much. So it's not necessarily have to go to there. You can just like push down with the elbow against my hand, and now press from there. You can still get a lot of lat in that position as well at the same time. Okay? But you want to be careful about coming down past that 45 degrees, and then you want to be careful about being too high. Okay? Right? So somewhere right in the middle, you're going to be able to get like pretty good activation from there. And then if you do a double, you can coach it from here. So your elbows are too low. Here? Right there. Yeah. A little higher on this side. Good. Now just press up. Whoa. Elbows came in again. Hold it right there. Good. And now stabilize the elbow and press up. Yes. Yeah. Stabilize the elbow. Lift the elbow a little bit. Yes, right there. Good. Bring it up and then back down. Lift the elbow a little more for me now. Yes. There, and then one more. Lift it up a little bit more for me. Yes, right there. And lift. So I'm really glad we caught that, because that's probably one of the number one things that I see. If you're looking for a neutral position, neutral spine, neutral pelvis, you're looking for a 45 degree, which is going to give you symmetrical muscle activation around it. The number one thing that happens is somebody starts on one side of that neutral position, and then they're thinking about moving in a certain direction and they go too far in that direction. So I've seen people that start this way, and we're trying to create a posterior tilt into neutral. And the next time I see them, they're like, I think I got that pelvis thing, I've got it, figured out. And I'm like, dude, you're way too far on the posterior side now. Now we need to start working on this. And I've seen it the same way. You see a sway back athlete, we're trying to create curvature, natural curvature, and the next time I see them, they're way up here. And so the whole idea with you is we started 2 trap. Then we went not enough trap. Right. Way too much left. You want to be in the middle so that we have a symmetrical distribution of responsibility across those muscles.
Because it's funny, even changing the mechanic, I already feel the little fatigue. And rotator cuff on this left side. So, would you recommend activating this muscle, like for chest training?
Yeah, what I would do is, if I like doing an activation, and then afterwards I would do it like a total burnout on all your postural muscles.
Oh, okay.
So at the end of your upper body day or your end of your lift session, I would just fatigue the heck out of those deep muscles.
Like this stuff you just did.
Oh yeah, the stuff I just did, like the manual control, or like slow eccentric control, or some rotator cuff stuff, some scap stuff. I just really burn them out at the end, because they're small muscle groups. They tend to be a little bit more aerobic, the way the muscle groups work. And so I actually find a lot of those muscles, you need a lot of volume, and you can't tolerate that much load anyways, because they're relatively weak muscles, right? So you just have to do a ton of reps and a ton of volume. So those slow, like burnout sets with light weights for like 30s and 40s, like I would do that for the small postural muscle in the shoulder at the end of the workout, and then maybe just a little bit of muscle activation in the beginning. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, huge value there. Cool. That just totally changed my perception of, because I feel this left shoulder. I haven't done very much weight. 40 pounds. I already feel the pec, but I feel a little bit of fatigue around this left shoulder joint. This shoulder not so much, but here, because you're getting me do something I'm not used to.
Yeah, there's a couple small muscle groups that are probably just inhibited. They've been turned off for a while. The fact that you're lifting, through that trap on that left side probably means that there's some kind of pathology in the shoulder that you've been trying to protect. And so I think just some strengthening of those small muscle groups. The thing that I love best about the shoulder is you can feel right away when those small muscle groups get turned on. It's like a light bulb moment. You're like, oh, that feels very different, because it can be such an unstable joint, right? And when you actually start to put some tension into some of those muscles that kind of lock it in place, and it takes some of the pressure off those big muscle groups, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, sure. So it was a pec minor dip. So it was basically from here, up, shoulders up, come down, and then contract the pec minor. Okay. Is that effective, or what do you think? So me looking at that exercise, like the person who made it and called it a pec minor dip, they might be seeing something different, or they might have some different articulation. When I look at that, I think serratus anterior, and I actually don't think pec minor. I actually think a little bit more around the serratus and the lat, personally. Those are the muscles that ultimately depress the shoulder, right? So I've done that before. I call it a scap dip. So you're essentially going into this position off the dip, and then you're just working from there to there. Correct. Right. Exactly. So you're just and the big thing with that one is try not to protract too much. Try to keep it neutral, so you got a little bit of retraction. Maybe a little softening in the elbow to bring it back up, but I find that it's more lat serratus than pec minor myself. Just personally. I got you. Now the ideal dip to maximize, now is it more of a lower pectoralis major movement? Yeah, I mean the interesting thing, traditionally I think for dips, a lot of people were using it for the pec minor and thinking, oh, this is going to help develop that kind of lower pec. This is just my thought process. Like I certainly am not in the business of using EMG on these different exercises, so I'm not in the bodybuilding space. But I will say that I think the pec minor kind of contracts as a whole. I'm not so sure that this exercise is really going to bring out those lower fibers. Personally, that's just my take on it. There's muscle physiologists who know way more than me that might say differently, but I would say that because it engages the serratus so much, people might do it and then be like, oh, that's lower pec, right? It's just right there, right? So I just think that it's a pec major exercise, but I think you do get a ton of serratus in this, and obviously there's
There's flexion at the elbow, so you're getting quite a bit of tricep in this one as well.
Let's do a dip. I'll do a dip.
Okay.
And you give me your 2 cents.
Okay.
Then we go from here.
Yeah, I like it. So I think the technique looks really good. You know, interesting thing about dips, there's a lot of like rehab people. I spend a lot of time doing strength conditioning as an adjunct to rehab. A lot of people will look at dips and be like, oh, you know, I hate that exercise. I actually don't dislike dips. I actually think they're a decent exercise when they're done properly. The traditional thing is some people, when they're using a load that's too much for them, or they're doing the dip with the wrong technique, they fall into that kind of rotation of the shoulder, that inferior rotation of the shoulder, right? So they get a little bit too deep, and very similar to the last exercise, you know, they're just creating a little bit too much of that forward rotation, and they're using the pec minor and the bicep tendon. To me, that's somebody who's just not very strong. But I think you can use more pec and more lat, more pec major, more lat, by retracting the shoulder through the dip. Okay. And I think like naturally, because of the motion, you do have a little bit of anterior rotation of the shoulder. But anterior, inferior, depending on how somebody wants it. Some people call it inferior and then superior rotation. Some people call it anterior, posterior. But when the shoulder rotates this way, that's naturally going to happen in the dip. Your goal is to control that motion so that it doesn't happen too much. Of course. So you're going to get some of that, but you want to make sure. So the way that it would happen too much are when people roll too far forward this way. Oh, right? Yeah, okay. If you get a little bit of retraction right through the motion, you control it. And so when it's going this way, you got very minimal serratus anterior activation. Okay. If your serratus is holding you here through the dip motion, I think it can be really good. And to me, that's a function of depth. Okay. Right? So if you can control the position of the shoulder through the depth and then push from here, I actually really like it. You know, I think it can be like a good exercise. Even at the top, you know, making sure that, you know, you finish the motion at the top and really squeeze. And I think it's just some people go a little bit too deep. And I think that they use a little bit too much momentum at the bottom. And so it's just pulling in that top part of the shoulder. But you can use this through controlled ranges. You can start with a scap dip. Right. And then you can work with just a little bit of tricep motion. Okay. And then you eventually work your way up to a better range of motion. But what I loved about your scapula was that, yes, there was a little bit of natural rotation forward, but it was not excessive, and you had really good control in the back, so I thought it was actually pretty good. Awesome. Yeah. Now, when it comes to the actual width of how the arms are, like say, for example, the arms are closer to the body, or they're wider over here, or even some guys I've seen do dips like this. Yeah. You can believe it. Yeah. So I'm trying to look at the difference in those three, you know, mechanics. So let's say, for example, a dip here, Andy, a dip like this, and a dip like that. Well, essentially what's going to happen is it's going to change the muscle activation. Yeah. So the wider you get, you know, the harder it's going to be on your pecs and the easier it's going to be on your triceps. And then obviously when you have an inverted grip, that's a lot of tension in the triceps. So I think the big thing is that, you know, depending on what you're trying to train, like I know some people that can do a lot of weight on dips, and then they might use like a particular type of grip to get a little bit more tricep activation, but it's much lighter, obviously. I think from the perspective of wide versus narrow, I like narrow a little bit better. It just gives you a little more freedom of motion at the shoulder. So you're much more likely to be able to control the shoulder position through the lift, as opposed to getting into a wide position where now the range of motion requirements of the shoulder are very high, and you've taken some of the range of motion requirements out of the elbow. So the elbow just, you know, I think the more kind of elbow involvement in the movement, the better, because you just have a little more freedom of range. I think when you get a little wide, it's a little bit harder with the shoulder. So I personally would rather see somebody use a cable, like if they want to go here, rather than use the dip as their exercise of choice. I would much rather use a cable exercise or, you know, a dumbbell variation for that type of position than a dip. You know, to each their own. Some people like the load that they're getting on the dips, and for maybe a competitive bodybuilder that might just bring out a muscle group by getting that much load. But you know, I think for the most part there's a little more risk of injury when you get wider. Now, if, let's say for example, I'm going to show you something here. Yeah. So if I go like, I modify my depth to certain degrees. So we were talking about, you know, just basically this. Yeah. Let's say I'm only doing this. Yeah. Explain the difference of that, and then if I'm going, you know, full range of motion. So some people can't do a full dip. Yeah,
right?
sure,
So,
sure.
or if they want to go really, really heavy and like overload the dip movement with like 2 plates, they might just do, you know, here and then come back up.
Yeah, for sure. I really think, I look at the motion of the shoulder.
Okay.
Like I think the biggest risk with a dip, especially when you're doing high loads, is that there's just so much forward rotation of the shoulder. So what I find is if you're able to control that, and you've got pretty good range of motion through there, I think it's great. You know, I think one good indication on dips is like if you put your arms behind me, if you just put your fists in your kidneys like that,
Like this?
yeah, just do that. And then you pull forward, like you've actually got like decent range of motion there, right? Like actually through this lift. And so if I'm bringing you up high, like I can get you into that range of motion, right? So it's already know for you, like that's about where your range of motion is. Like you're probably about 3 inches above your hip there, right? And you've got the ability to maintain retraction. Watch what happens when I bring your hands up higher. Just relax your shoulders and let your hands come up. Can you feel the difference with that position? Yeah. So that's a really dangerous position for you, and that's like, because your shoulders are rolled forward, the load is not going to be a muscular load. It's going to be more of a joint-based load, and a lot of the like sort of myotendinous junctions are going to be under load there. So I think that the way you were doing it was within your range of motion. That's why I liked it, and everyone's going to be a little bit different with that. But I think that you should basically just do that exercise from the back. Right. Go to this position. Okay, there's my comfortable load. I can maintain a pretty good shoulder position through there. And if I go any higher, I'm going to have to unhinge the shoulder and then come backwards. But that's why I like dips, because you can do them at any range you want. I think it's just like the incline press. I think it's just really good to actually look at your passive range and then work through that range if possible.
Let's say we did dips more for the triceps, right? Yeah. Let's say we go on this thing here. Yeah. Like,
yes.
You know, these kind of dips, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So as you put the hands behind me, I can kind of see my range of motion. But let's say, for example, I'm doing this tricep overload. Yeah. What's optimal? Is it like that range of motion, or if I go right down, like what is optimal for that for tricep recruitment?
Well, the best way to look at it when you're looking at doing a tricep loaded exercise is the more movement at the elbow, the more tricep. Right? And that's really what it boils down to. That's why in a close grip bench, there's more tricep. It's because there's more movement at the elbow. In a wide grip, there's less movement at the elbow. That's what it always boils down to. So when you're making a modification to this lift versus that lift, you know, what you're really doing is you're seeing more motion at the tricep, right? So you're seeing a little bit more tricep control of the movement, because that lift is primarily elbow extension. Yeah. There's not as much push, right? As you start to get deeper, ironically, you start moving at the shoulder a little bit more, right? So it really depends on what you're going for. Like I don't actually like deep lifts on that lift. Like I actually find from that lift, like being in a high position and just working the extension component is probably better. So just working on that sort of end range extension. I think if you're going to do something deep in elbow position, you're better off doing some kind of a modified press from this position, you know, some kind of a skull crusher, some kind of a dumbbell exercise from there. I wouldn't use a dip for a deep elbow position, but you can do some extensive stuff. And I actually find the same here. You know, the deeper you get, the more difficult it's going to be to control the muscle. So on these, I actually like those high positions. And I think, you know, make it heavy and then just go partial the way down. So if you're doing a dip from this position, you can load this up and work this range and get really strong from this position, right? And come down to this position. You can do dip holds from here as well. We can do ab work. You can do different types of holds from this position. You can work the scapula as well. You can do different types of movements in here. Obviously, you see gymnasts that do different types of works on the bars. If you ever seen somebody that works on the parallel bars, like you ever seen the shoulder and the tricep development that they have, like it's very impressive, right? So a lot of times, like just being in that close chain position has some value, and then most of the time for those gymnasts, they don't have the same kind of shoulder impingement issues, you know, but they're not going into super deep positions necessarily all the time, right? They're doing a variety of different types of movements, but not in the dip type of motion do they go like super deep like that.
If you had to pick one move for the chest, and you're given one move and says, Andy, what can you do one to build that chest? What would you pick?
You know, I'm a big believer that there's two ways to build it. I think that if you're somebody that responds well to low and high intensity work, I actually like the bench press because I feel like the increased load that you can do on the bench press is better. You know, I've always found you get a little bit more bang for your buck when you create a little bit more load from a muscle growth perspective. Not everybody responds that way. So some people have a certain type of neurons, and we talked about this before, sympathetic and parasympathetic, and some athletes just need load to be able to grow. If you're somebody that doesn't need load to be able to grow, and you have a lot of hormone, and it's really just about conditioning the muscle, you might do better with like some high repetitious dumbbell work.
Okay.
So I would take a sympathetic athlete.
Right.
To me, that person's going to need load.
Yeah.
Because they get a lot of growth just from generating the hormone off the intensity of the workout. So HIT stuff I think works really well. And when it comes to load, I like barbell lifts personally.
Okay.
When you're going to do a dumbbell lift, that's going to have a better influence on a parasympathetic athlete, in my opinion. I think those athletes naturally produce growth hormone a little bit more, and I think that they're going to respond more to muscle fatigue type stuff.
Would you favor the incline bench press or the flat bench press? Which one more?
I actually would favor the flat bench press, personally. I think part of it's just anecdotal. It's probably based on my own experience, but I think you get a little bit more pec major off the flat bench press.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the pec major is a depressor of the shoulder, right?
Yeah.
So it's it's pulling the shoulder down. So you're getting pec major. Part of the job of the pec major is to pull the shoulder in this direction. So if you're pressing up, you're probably getting more pec minor, right? If you're pressing down, you're getting a little bit more pec major. That's probably why a decline bench, it's going to give you a little bit more pec major. I just don't love the decline bench. I think it puts a lot of pressure on the shoulder in those deep ranges. So I do like, barbell lifts. And most of the time, like what I found is a barbell bench press is going to create a lot of shoulder pathology for most people. So I actually find that you can press off the rack. So you can just set up a rack to come to here and then press off of there. And you can get like pretty decent loads for the athletes that have a lot of shoulder pathology. But I'm actually, I don't mind the barbell lift. I think that it's good to do a combination of barbell and dumbbell work. But just to answer your question, like which one I think is going to be better, I've always found the high intensity athletes respond better to load, and then the volume athletes respond better to dumbbell work.
Interesting. Well, there you go, dumbbell and barbell work. So Andy, let's go to overhead presses next.
Okay.
I want to jump into there because it's one of the most, obviously, commonly underused or flawed movements I would say even I use.
Okay.
Let's kind of go there. Now, we got dumbbells right here. So do you prefer dumbbells or barbells for the overhead press?
I think it depends on who I'm doing it with. I think if we're doing it with some like decent weight, I actually use an overhead press with a barbell as a shoulder rehabilitation exercise. For some people, believe it or not.
Okay.
I can elaborate. Yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the most contraindicated exercises for athletes with shoulder issues. I actually really like it, as long as they have the range. If they don't have the range to do it, then it's probably not a good idea. But if they have the range and their issue is instability, which is actually the case with a lot of athletes, and there's no pre-existing pathology, I just like it as a way of creating stability in that position.
Interesting.
At the end of the day, if you're trying to engage all those muscles in the shoulder, all the scap stabilizer muscles, rotator cuff, all the deep stabilizers around the shoulder, it's a pretty good exercise to do that. I think you just have to have no real existing pathology in the joint, so no labrum tearing, no real impingement, ongoing issues, no rotator cuff issues, and then you have to have the range of motion to get there. To be honest, most people have some shoulder pathology, they don't have the range, so I would contraindicate it, then I would use dumbbells. Because dumbbells just give you a little more freedom of movement. Yeah.
So to build that shoulder cap, now obviously you've got laterals, you've got upright rows, you've got presses. Okay. If done right overhead, can you hit that medial deltoid as effectively as doing a lateral?
Yeah, I actually consider it's interesting. Like it's not a closed chain exercise, it's really an open chain exercise, but I actually find barbell work, I'm not really sure the reason, but anecdotally I've actually found you just get a little bit of a greater neuromuscular response. I think the type of stabilization with the dumbbell is very specific, and the type of work with a barbell, you're going to get a little bit more stimulation of major muscle groups. I think with a dumbbell, you're going to have some of the minor muscle groups like contributing a little bit more responsibility because it's a little bit more of an unstable position. But I think some of that instability goes away with the barbell comparative to the dumbbell. And for that reason, some of the major muscle groups get a little bit more work.
Okay.
So I just think you can tolerate a little bit more load on a barbell.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of, it's interesting here because in my line of work, like not a lot of people will favor barbell work, and there's so much limitations to it from a movement standpoint. But it's really interesting. If you talk to some of the like really successful Olympic lifters out there, they'll tell you that there's a lot of athletes out there that can lift hundreds of pounds over their head with no problem. And they have actually great range of motion and probably some of the healthiest shoulders in the world of any athlete. So if you talk to them, they kind of scratch their heads as to why it's contraindicated. Yet if you go into the physical therapy world, the rehab world, or the orthopedic surgery world, they'll pull their hair out at the idea of an overhead press. So the whole thing is, it really depends on what's going on. You know, do you have range of motion? Is your issue stability? You know, do you want to create a little more instability to strengthen the shoulder capsule, or do you want to actually take that instability factor away? And that's the whole idea. Like years ago when the Bosu came out, people would squat in the Bosu, and there's a lot of people who think, look, it's better, that you're more unstable, right? And there was a lot of people thinking, geez, this is like very gimmicky, right? Like I would rather just throw a bar on my back and squat. And the thing is, at the end of the day, how is it different? It's different in the sense that it's more unstable, so you're probably getting a more kind of proprioceptive response. You're getting a little bit more small muscle groups assisting in the movement. In just a normal back squat, you're a lot more stable, and there's a lot more major muscle group contribution to the movement. So it just depends on what you're looking for. I think barbell, dumbbell, to me, that's how I differentiate it. Dumbbell, more freedom of movement, a little more stabilization involved. And then I think barbell is a little less stabilization involved, a little less freedom of movement. So you're not going to take the muscle through its full shortening and lengthening cycle, but you're going to get like a tremendous amount of load with the barbell. And I think there are some applications to it.
Let's go do barbell.
Yeah.
You got me all intrigued now with this barbell stuff.
All right, cool. Let's do it.